the executive Playbook in proud association with Hennessy XO. Each drop is an odyssey.
Her designs are worn by the likes of Celine Dion, and after almost 30 years in the business, she is without a doubt South Africa's best-known jeweler. But beyond her entrepreneurial and creative prowess, she's also a fierce advocate for gender parity and has been involved in many projects to promote socio-economic opportunities for women. But all that glitters isn't always gold. As a little girl from humble beginnings, what is the secret to Jenna Clifford's success? Let's find out. Jenna Clifford, I'm quite excited to sit down with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me today in our design studio. It's wonderful that you came to me.
I was about to say that as we walked through the building, we actually witnessed so many beautiful designs that you have out, but we will touch on that in just a moment. But really actually just tells us about the journey that you've walked over the last 30 years. Was that always the dream, always the ambition to walk the journey this long and with so much success?
I think if you do anything in life, you best love doing it because you've got to do it a long time. And I think art's always been my passion, probably due to my incapacity of my left brain, having dyslexia. So you have to make a plan. So that's basically how it's happened. I've always been passionate about people, the natural world, animals, babies, and of course my key passion is women, even though I'm very malefic myself, because you join the boys in your head because they always do better. If you know what I'm saying. So,
and has that worked for you, actually, being more malefic in terms of your approach to life?
Yes, probably also as a granny, and I've always been my authentic self, which means most of my life I've been judged. But you get a bit of a rhino skin eventually because you know in your soul you're nice, you're kind. And nice and kind is seen as weak. I'm not a weak woman. I'm a strong woman. And I would advise that to all women. Get educated even if you're dyslexic because there's streaming and so many ways you can learn today. But passion is key in what you do if you want long life, especially if you want to be grey, old, and still be relevant and around.
And that's certainly something that's worked for you in terms of finding your passion. And listening to you describe your journey, you've often said that you were designer by design.
Yes.
And that this journey has really been alchemy for you in terms of finding your passion.
See, you got good words. Life is alchemistic if you choose to take that path and not fit into the abattoirs that we all guided into by our incredibly bad schooling systems, whether they're privatized or whether they run by state. The education system is shocking, and it's almost globally shocking because we don't come out educated. We've got to find the University of Hard Knocks first. And a lot of people don't get through that, which saddens my Virgo soul because everybody's born a child of God, and them playing small doesn't serve this world. So I'd love to change that still in my lifetime.
And how do you hope to do so? Because I'm keen to actually talk about the dichotomy of the life that you live in terms of being an artist and yet still being an entrepreneur, but how in terms of finding the balance between both of these, it almost seems as though the artist within you is the more dominant personality or the one that you prefer to highlight.
Well, definitely, because it was the only skill that was afforded. Because when you're at school and you're told you're dumb the whole time, and when the drawing session comes or color the maps and you get oh, wow. There was one endorsement. And I think in life, that's what we've all got to do, whether we're young, mid-age, or old. It's never too late. Never. And your mind always defines where you're going. After the mind, the soul and the physical carne body follows. So that's why I think we must just be more positive, especially in this globalized mess, because I'm old enough to actually say it the way it is.
Tell us more, Jenna. Now I'm quite keen because, as you say, you tell it like it is. When you look at the current environment that we live in, not only in South Africa, but globally, you've mentioned that education is struggling. But where are we falling short when it comes to reaching gender parity, creating a great stream of entrepreneurs within South Africa, and even making the environment more favorable for business owners to succeed in the climate that we're in South Africa?
You fix it by bringing up the feminine, because women birth everything. Women. Men are great, So you do not take away the moon when you've got the sun and the moon, because you get a desert. So parity is natural law, which has been broken. And if we look at the infirm, even men get infirm, because when they get older, they get abused and knocked out. So their term is coming. So it is of natural good thinking to think of natural order, which means your women and your men unite. You stand together in parity and you fly as one. We shouldn't be asking the questions. We should be rallying to order, demanding the best education in the world that serves the education that you come out understanding death and tax, work and the land, love, and not the Cinderella complex. And men globally have got to learn to respect their mothers, their sisters, and females' prowess of natural law.
Jenna, how do we discuss this and unpack it within the South African and African context? And I ask that because, like many South Africans, you yourself grew up in a very patriarchal society. We're well aware that within African culture as well, that's a dynamic that we are still struggling with. But if we had to implement this locally, are there solutions?
There is a political unwillingness and there is a patriarchal unwillingness to change the status quo. It's as simple as that. From fathers, headmasters, male schools, and all men should be asking themselves that, because they would have a better life, a more prosperous life, a more balanced life, and they wouldn't get all the diseases and all the running arounds they do in the JIPO system.
And
Simple.
just to be clear, this is not you male bashing. As you say, it's about
I
finding
love
that
men.
parity.
They're mainly my
balance.
friends. There's good men out there, but unfortunately only 20% of men are what you call godly good men. The other 80%, they're men with weapons, because their minds are controlled usually in their pants, which is a problem. By the way, we're number one in the world in rape too. Number one in the world on rape and abuse. So these are the facts, and the facts speak. Do you understand? There was a narrative there. Mussolini, Idi Amin, Robert Mugabe, and we can carry on and on. To Lenin, to Stalin, and to the current leaders. Power is not good for the collective.
Jenna, I'm listening to you say this, and I'm sure for many of our audience as well, they might be sitting back and thinking, what a strong woman, what an assertive woman, a woman who's quite sure of herself, but also very clear about the inequalities and dynamics.
That came with a lot of pain.
I was about to go there.
It came with a lot of pain, and I chose not to be a victim. Even though I've been victimized and vilified, I know the truth is heard but not applied. They know it too. It's an inconvenient truth. But you know, love sets you free, and you carry on practicing until death us do part, literally. And I hope in my lifetime, more women and good men stand together for their children and for sustainable lives. This is not sustainable.
Certainly not sustainable, and things almost appear to be exacerbated, right, by the current pandemic that we're in. We're well aware of the challenges we've had in our local economy as well with the slow pickup. And where I'm hoping to take this conversation to, Jenna, is to understand how this fits into Jenna Clifford, the businesswoman. The journey that you have walked thus far, and of course, even adapting throughout the various changes in the last 3 decades. What's kept
There's
you
been
going?
a lot of changes, but I think if one also starts observing to follow the money trails and see where things are going wrong, and then pick people you like, that you like their prowess within their industry, even if it's not applied to you. If they're walking in the light, they're doing the right things, and they are challenging these systems with love.
Someone might say, well, you're a designer, so it's easy to create beautiful things, such as the crockeryware that we see here, the jewelry that you're wearing. But if I'm in mining, manufacturing, and struggling to find employment for South Africans, how do we
Well,
create
that's the
that joy and
thing. The
love?
schooling system creates a bad output. So everybody's always looking for a job. In the schooling system, if they taught business, entrepreneurship, political sciences correctly and all the land, you would get the diverseness like we see. We have so much talent in South Africa. It is frightening, the amount of talent. given this much opportunity, because it's not even catered with at the schools. But I've seen people like myself that have done even taking rubbish and plastic bags and weaved the finest things. So it's always by design. A being chooses where it wants to go. And that's why mothers are so vital. And when you take away the dream of women, you take away the dreams of all children, which includes the boys.
I think we love the passion that you've shared in terms of the goal and the ambition to reach gender parity. And I'm quite excited to see how you might be sharing that kind of messaging, not only with your staff, majority of whom are female, that we've experienced here in the studio, but with your daughters as well. And that speaks to the legacy that you have tried to build here and the kind of leadership you've had to instill in them. Your 3 daughters.
Well, that's a joke, because normally when we, for me as a child and everybody, you used to see a business and sons.
Yes.
You never see a business and daughters. Well, in this case it is, but it's not an expression that we use anymore. I'm very, very lucky that my daughters love design. And by the way, they're quite clever girls too, because they had a certain prowess at school, something I didn't manage.
Yeah.
But they definitely better, more refined ladies than where I came from, the hood, the Bez Valley.
Let's talk about that, because you certainly had wonderful experiences there,
Yes.
but navigating your way through some difficulty. I understand you only came to Joburg at the age of 17, and as you say, Bez Valley was where you grew up.
I grew up in Bez Valley, and my parents moved to Natal when I'd finished Standard 5 at JP Prep. So I moved to Natal, and only when I was finished high school did I move back. So I've had the both, but obviously my young childhood here, it goes with memory of recall in that particular area.
Yeah.
I think that's why when I came back as a teenager, driving a car and getting very nervous in the Joburg traffic and, getting lost and all of those things, it was something to get through. But you know what I'm saying? There were always challenges,
And I want to talk about your childhood, perhaps to reflect on any particular moments or highlights that actually shaped your worldview. You do mention that it was quite difficult in terms of having to prove yourself to be someone who could be successful, given the educational challenges that you had. But what also stands out for me is that you had a number of mentors, even though they might not have mentored you directly.
Yes.
But watching individuals from a distance taught you a lot of what you know.
Definitely some of the brands like Estee Lauder, having that beautiful model, Karen Graham, with a world-class thing. And it was a notion that even Elizabeth Arden in cosmetics at the time wasn't even, it was a phenomena, because men own companies, not women. So those were the sparks that I saw as a little poor girl, because, I used to go with my grandmother to town in those days, and then they had Studderfords, Greenacres, and where you'd actually see John Orr's. Those don't even exist today as businesses. But I think that was the dream, because it gave me a picture that I couldn't see in my own environment. But I think it was the sport that my dad put me into that really made me strong, because you have to do it even if you don't want to do it. And with practice, you get proficient. And with efficiency, you've got an opportunity of greatness. As a child, I was given a choice, but because we were poor and there was no swimming pools, when he said swim, I thought it was fun. I really didn't realize how many hours a day I'd be at it for so many years. But it's given me the base of my life and the belief system that I can, even though the odds are against every woman.
That's quite interesting that you mention that, because it goes back to an earlier theme that you mentioned about finding something you're passionate at, but still having to put in the hours and the work that's required. Can these two things coexist in order to build legacies like you have?
You have to do that. And I think even in this country, we should learn a lot from that. We're putting in a lot of people into powerful positions that are not necessarily equipped and trained in a legacy of time, in proficiency within that gambit. And the outcome, if you're not trained in something, you're not practiced in it, not adept at it, and not super confident, is you don't win a medal for it. That's the thing. We don't send teams to the Olympics that are not proficient. So what are we doing in positions of power? We should be thinking this.
And holding people to account.
And the accountability is key for all of us in our performance. Just like a company, if it's in profit, you will see dedicated people working efficiently and cohesively to success and sustainability. We're not sustaining in the quantum we need to. Our deficits of what we've lost in this country over a term through various alignments has not served our people or our state.
As we walk into your studio today, even when one thinks of your name and the brand that you represent, people align it with opulence, luxury, wealth, money, all these materialistic, beautiful items that many people might actually attach their identity to.
Well, you know, funny enough, I'm now making things in silver and gold. So this is a unicorn I designed a number of months ago, and it's only been finished now. It's actually a locket, it opens. Things like this are safe to wear because your costs of silver are not vast, but it's still very spiritual, and your electromagnetic energy is very good. So making things like this that represent almost a childhood, it's not a childhood, it's mythological. And if you dream, your dreams will get wings, but you've got to alliterate it. It's got to be over and over, just like practice of anything we want to do proficiently. So I tend to keep a childhood going as a senior old citizen, as most people, they relegate age. I'm one old lady that loves being a granny, loves having gray hair, because I've earned every second of it. And I'm very proud that I've survived it. And I know in this path, through my pain, I've able to articulate to others and give them hope and show them ways of divergence, just like a river meanders. It doesn't go straight. It goes around its obstacles and its rocks and things like that, finding the natural tributary to its life force, the sea. So we must have dreams, right?
Certainly, have dreams and keep them going. And I think that also speaks to something very different in terms of your approach, bringing your whole self to the table as a leader and understanding how nature, human connection does speak to the kind of success that we're trying to attain.
I never see myself, or I don't like to see myself as leading this company. In fact, I only reclaimed my title of CEO 3 years ago, by the way.
Why? Why did you let go of the title in the first
Because
place?
I also wanted to be a mother, and I wanted to have a family unit. So as much as I worked very hard, I stepped down in that capacity and took the art frame of the business until 3 years ago.
Is that a deliberate choice? And I ask this because so often men are never asked the question, how do you strike a balance between being a CEO
Well, you can't
and family?
really.
For women,
You can't really. It's very difficult because most men don't understand. A housewife and a mother is the hardest job you will ever do. So luckily today I'm seeing in the younger generations, they co-doing things. Men are changing nappies, and things like that. It's too wonderful to see. I've got hope for the new generations coming through.
You do?
I do, because their mothers in the last 2 generations are educated, do you understand? So you're seeing a better cohesive interaction and parity of parenting, which is very nice. The men know it's their baby, whereas before they only wanted the baby when it was walking, talking, and they could have usufruct of it, if you know what I'm saying, either within the business gambit or what we're known for in South Africa, rape. Because we have a lot of that going on as well, unfortunately, between fathers, uncles, grandfathers, etc. It's too pitiful.
It is quite pitiful, Jenna, and as you say, really reflects on the negativity that we often have to deal with in South Africa.
That's why we must change it. Do you understand? We're not hurting anybody, we are changing it. People have got to be sensitized, and obviously people that are what you call chronic at it, well, they've got to be, taken up in what we commonly call prisons. And a prison should be a rehab center. So that's another thing that we've got to do. You know, when people make vast mistakes, punitive punishment of overcrowding and all of that is nonsense. It's really putting back disasters back on the street later. And humans deserve better, really.
Jenna, I'm keen to understand how you define success.
Not like other people, because success in the global playout seems to be either money and the prowess, or the success, the money and the prowess. And that doesn't define success, because you've got to have your health, you've got to have your family intact to create legacies, because that's how we all learn. We have to apply all the successful pegs in our stool. A stool can stand with one peg. You need a huge base.
I find that so refreshing.
It can't really stand with 2 pegs. 3, G-O-D, it's getting there. 4, A-T-O-M, it's there. You want 4 good pillars, and then the periphery pillars for success.
Jenna, for someone who is so enlightened and very broadly so, and very in tune and self-aware of themselves, it takes us back and reminds us, as you highlighted earlier, about your childhood, where perhaps you might have had certain anxieties of not being good enough, maybe inferiority complex that might have been shared with you and highlighted because of the educational struggles that you've had. What lessons do business leaders need to learn from this? And I say this to up-and-coming entrepreneurs or people who are already established in their roles, that perhaps these connotations of not being good enough should not necessarily continue to live within them.
I think we must change the way we define everything, because it's a sticky end. Do you understand? A lot of people don't realize that excellence drives them into a position where there is a very lonely gate. Leaders need to get integrated in their thinking, because often your best leaders that come through have been marginalized as children, have had impediments, and they found an algorithm where they can get through within their prowess. And usually in these beings, and there are women like that, they might be ultra successful, but they're destitute in their soul. And most people have their soul asleep. It's put to sleep.
Well, we want to reawaken people. And I guess to close things off, if you had to write an executive playbook to live by, what would it entail?
The mad version of my mad life, or very unorthodox. I've just done what I could do under all those limitations. So I know it's possible for anybody to get through, I promise. You've just got to have a will, and the way will be found. What I do encourage is always let light and truth. Never fox yourself by lying to yourself. If you don't lie to yourself, you won't lie to others. Anything coming with an ill-gotten gain is never yours. And even if you work for it, it's never yours. You're a custodian of it only in your lifetime. People should get abridged of that. Life matters. The soul matters. The way you feel matters. Your health matters. Your mental well-being matters. So unless these narratives are changed, we will have the same output, just with deviant variables. Why do that?
Jenna, thank you so much for your time today. You've really reminded us of key elements that we often, as you say, are asleep to.
Yes.
So thank you so much for your time and allowing us and engaging us in conversation here today.
Thank you, Gugu. I've enjoyed it, and I hope I haven't upset half of the country.
The Executive Playbook, in association with Hennessy XO, celebrating personal and business success.